Today's scripture reading comes from Genesis 1, verses 2 and 3, and 26 through 28. The earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Then God said, "Let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humans in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves upon the earth." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Well, good morning. It's good to be with you again. After quite a while since the last time I was here, it's always good to greet each other and to see what's going on in your lives and share a little bit of time with you. And I appreciate the invitation from Reverend Eric as he is at General Assembly to come and fill this pulpit. I appreciate the elders and John Clark who called me and asked if I would come and do it, and so glad to be here. It's always hard to know when you're only preaching one sermon how to pick a topic. And so I was looking, I do keep track of you in the newsletter that comes, and so I knew that this summer you've been talking a lot about butterflies, right? And there's not a butterfly in the sanctuary. What is the matter? Oh, last week, okay, all right. But I decided that, maybe creation is the way to go. After all, it is a glorious summer that we're having, a little warm right now, but still a beautiful world that we are living in. And so I looked at the story of creation, and I've been reading a book by Diana Butler Bass, who's a biblical scholar and theologian, about having dominion, which is a part of the creation story. And she's the one who I blame or give credit to for the title, "What's the Problem with Dominion? What does that really mean?" And she's the one who can tell us because she's done a lot of research and a lot of study. But to begin this sermon, I want to tell you about an experience that I had that sort of opens up two very different ways of understanding what it means to have dominion over something. I spent Tuesday evening a week ago doing one of my least favorite things to do. I attended a special called Homeowners Association meeting. Anybody else in an HOA? God bless you. All right. It was called for by a petition that had to be signed by 10% of the residents of our neighborhood, who got 10% of the residents who were upset by choices made to replace some dying trees in a small island at one of the corners of our neighborhood. In all honesty, I must tell you I would have stayed away because I knew it would be uncomfortable. I knew it would be contentious, except for the fact that after 9 years of living in this community and avoiding all forms of serving on any boards or committees, I decided in retirement I should, do a little something, and so I became a member of the Landscape Committee. Who would think there'd be conflict on a Landscape Committee? Well, I was surprised at how large the turnout was, and the board sat across the front, and they sat quietly. We had to have a lawyer from the HOA who came and led the meeting and set the rules for the meeting. And their case was made thoughtfully by one of those 10%. It included complaints about not having been consulted about what to plant there, as well as a call to replant what had just been planted there and never do it again in our beautiful neighborhood. That's about the tone that was used. The resident critic, who frequently complains long and loudly about most everything that happens in our neighborhood, then spoke and called out the board members for their hasty and ill-advised decisions and tried to force the board to have all of the residents vote on every single change that would be made from now on. Well, this was not going to be promised on the spot, and though the president did promise that all this information would be taken into consideration and they would come up with a plan that would include the thoughts of more people as they moved forward. And the resident who initiated the meeting and who has been the longest resident there since its beginning spoke. And she painted this beautiful verbal image of how Wood Park was when it was first being built, when she moved in some 30 years ago. It was barren, with lots of dirt being moved all around their house as others were being built. She watched as houses sprung up and a large pond was created and trees and grass replaced the rows of dirt. It was idyllic. And she just thought, we've got to keep it that way. We got to maintain the original plantings. Do not add or remove or change anything so that it would continue to be the most beautiful place it had always been. And honestly, I could see her pain as she tried to hold on to her joy and experience of an earlier time. And then there was George, whose name has been changed to protect the innocent. One of the board members, much newer resident, but one who was very involved in the care for the neighborhood. He spoke next. He had a different tone, and he gently responded, and he said, some difficult decisions had to be made to remove some of those trees that were over 30 years old, and we had tried to treat them and save them, albeit unsuccessfully. And he said, a great deal of thought and planning has gone into this replanting. And then he said this comment that really stuck to me. One neighbor is saying, you have to make us vote on every single thing that you do, and we're going to force you to do that. George had a different way of saying. He said this, we couldn't just focus on what was there for many years. We had to consider how the climate was changing and what would grow well there now and in the next 30 and more years. 2 ways of caring for a little corner of creation. Try to force your will upon it and keep it the same as you have always known it, or responsibly consider what is best for where we find things now and on into an unfolding future. To my great delight and surprise, the community largely agreed with George. Even many of those who had been unhappy agreed to work with the board to assess what could be done to make the result more acceptable to those who had complaints, and ideas were generated for how to make these decisions in the future so that we could all have information about what was happening and a chance to offer ideas. It gave me hope. Hope for the future of Wood Park and trust that it would indeed find a way forward to continue to be a beautiful and well cared for corner of creation. I tell you that story because it exemplified 2 ways that I was grappling with as I've been reading that book by Diana Butler Bass. 2 ways of understanding how to care for creation that we have been given and that we enjoy. If you would read, there's a translation of the Bible called the Inclusive Bible. We use the New Revised Standard Version, but there are many translations of the Bible. And I would tell you about the translation from the Inclusive Bible because it gives a different kind of flavor to what dominion might mean. It says it this way. Bear fruit, increase your numbers and fill the earth, and be responsible for it. Watch over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the living things on the earth. As our NRSV says, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." And herein lies the problem. What does it really mean to have dominion? Does it mean to subdue, to force our will upon creation, to bend it to suit our needs? Does God mean for us to force our agenda and will on all that God has created? That is the way we have traditionally understood it for a very long time. It gave us permission over the years to freely pollute our air, our land, our water in pursuit of economic gain and security, that we could have not just enough, but more than enough. Or is there a different understanding that can help us find a responsible partnership in a way to work with the principles of nature and our maker and creator of all things to enhance and nurture what we have been given? Diana, that biblical scholar, has some thoughts about that. I want to read a couple of them for you. She says this: in Western Christianity, dominion has often been interpreted as power, mastery, rule, authority over others in a hierarchical society. Dominion has been used to justify all sorts of religious crusades, programs, and genocides. It was twinned with dominate, inspiring the power-hungry with a biblical justification to conquer all the earth's resources and peoples. After all, the scriptures say to subdue, hold in bondage creation. But, she says, there's another way to understand it. Try some of these words: custodians, stewards, co-creators, partners. Indeed, the words translated exercise dominion over in her study of translation might be better translated as exercise mastery among. She says Hebrew scholars say that among doesn't mean to rule, but implies, there's an interesting phrase, to wander around with. You're going to have mastery means you're going to wander around with. I must do a lot of mastery in my life. Like a shepherd wanders among their flock. Dominion is ultimately a command concept. Human beings, male and female, with no distinction of role, tend, care for, keep, guard, and minister with God and with creation itself for the sake of the earth. Not us, for the sake of the earth. Genesis 1 is about community and relationship, not domination, not power. There is an order, but it is not hierarchical. Rather, it is a harmony of interrelatedness. It is responsible care. It is shared creativity. Our God would always have us tend creation with the same kind of tenderness and love that God uses with us. God does not force us, but always in our lives is inviting us to move towards being aligned with the better ways of living life, the ways we can live life that result in creativity and delight, in gratitude, in kindness and mercy and joy, in grace. Why would a God who operates in those ways seek to have us use force to subdue anyone or anything? Our earth is in desperate need of a new understanding that teaches us to be responsible partners with God and with each other as we heal the land that has been ravaged, the waters that have been polluted with waste and chemicals, our air that has changed to alter the very climate that has made life possible for eons. So on the way to renewing our earth, let us find hope and joy as we see ways of heaven and nature singing together. And one of the best ways of finding that joy and hope is by paying attention to what God is already up to and doing among us. This morning before I came, I was opening the blinds to let in the sunshine, and I noticed that outside of our windows, a big spider web had materialized overnight. Well, some spider, they're really working hard overnight. There was this large spider web, and it was beautiful with the dew on it. Pay attention to what God is doing outside our windows. We are paying attention when we count those 10 fingers and toes of that tiny newborn grandchild or child that comes into our lives. We pay attention as we see the exquisite craftsmanship and the bright colors of every flower that God has created, every blossom different and unique. As we enjoy the love of texture in the rough bark of a tree and in the soft fur of a kitten or a dog. As we soak in the sheer beauty of an orange sky as the sun sets over the ocean and casts shadows on the surface of the water. Nobody paints a sky better than God. Pay attention. I'm reminded of God's faithfulness every night when I see that once again God has hung the moon and the stars in the sky. And as I go on vacation, and I'm sure you do too, the majesty of those mountains that rise above, the attention to every detail in every blade of grass that tickle my feet when I walk barefoot through the yard. What an amazing God. And how even more amazing that God cares about me and cares about you. It makes me think of those verses in Psalm 8, 3 and 4. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is humanity that you are mindful of us, God? I know we are all so grateful for the one who, in the midst of creating all of this perfection, still holds us on God's mind. As God pays attention to us, as God's mind is on us and all of creation, as God is mindful, so may we also be. Amen.